Welcome to another in the series of NJAPM webinars. I'm Carl Cantrellisi, and today we're going to be talking with Roseann Vanella, and the topic is that divorce mediation is her full-time business. So, welcome, Roseann. How are you doing?
Hey, Carl, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a real pleasure. So you say mediation is your full-time job. And the first question that comes to my mind is, well, how much do you really make out of this? What kind of living do you make? I assume $30,000 not a full-time living to you. So
Yeah.
Just give me a flavor of this.
So, just to give you an idea, my background was that I was in corporate. I was an executive. I worked for a Fortune 100 company. And at this point in my practice, I've exceeded the salary I was making. But more than that, more than the money piece of it, I am nowhere near working the number of hours that I worked, and I have the flexibility to do what it is that I want to do with my time.
Okay, this is your only source of income.
This is it. It's basically myself and just, last year my partner joined in with me. She's handling business mediations, and this is all that we do. Yes, and we support ourselves, and we go on nice vacations, and we drive nice cars, and yeah, no, I'm doing great.
That's great. So now describe your current practice. Is it just divorce mediation, or you do some business too?
No, so my practice has really evolved over the time. So when I left my corporate job and I started mediation, I really felt strongly that I really wanted to focus on families and really be able to help families and affect families. So I just had my website, and it was strictly family and divorce mediation. So I would do some elder things and maybe some post-divorce, but really not a lot. And slowly what was happening was, because of my connections with the community, people were understanding and learning about my background. I have a very strong business background. So people started coming to me for divorces who were also in business together. So the interesting part of it was that eventually I realized that these clients who were in business, really the majority of them were going to stay in business because that was their sole income. So I would ask the question, do you have an operating agreement? Because typically, spouses are not going to have an operating agreement, and the answer would be no. So then I would kind of help them create operating agreements. So then slowly people started reaching out to me for like business partnership disputes, even just mediating operating agreements for people who are entering new businesses. So it wasn't until last year that I'm going to say reluctantly, finally just changed over everything on my website and really now advertise that we do handle the business mediations and things like that. And that's where my partner came into the business. She's very accomplished. She was an executive also in corporate, and she's leading that portion of it because I don't have the time with the amount of the family mediations that I'm doing. And also, I kind of came into this niche of doing high net worth divorces. Mm-hmm. That really came out of my relationship with a CPA firm, actually up in Princeton, that had asked me, they're really involved with a lot of franchise owners. So people who are multiple Dunkin' Donut, franchise owners and things like that. So they reached out to me and asked me if I could do a mediation. And I said, of course I can do it. It was a divorce mediation. I said, but I'm going to need some help. And we did our first one, and then we started doing others. And then I realized that there's a definite need and market for that. And that's kind of how I've tapped into these niches.
Well, tell us what you did when you were in private business.
So I worked for Canon, the Japanese manufacturer, and I was the admin person in charge of a national account sales division. So at the time that I left, we were probably doing somewhere close to 300 million. So under me directly, I was in charge of all contract negotiations, both nationally and internationally. So I was really mediating because I was the business person making sure that the deal happened, but also making sure that we as a company were financially sound. And I was working with attorneys. I also had marketing under me. I had bid responses. So that's really the financial piece where I really honed my abilities to run a business and really be aware of all of the financial issues that you need to be, and also for clients. So I had marketing, I mentioned that. So I had a broad range of departments.
So while you're not a lawyer, you became comfortable, I guess, with legal matters.
Totally, very comfortable negotiating, very comfortable with conflict. I've always been comfortable with conflict. I come from a very passionate Italian family. And, you know, if anybody is part of that, you know that we could be screaming at each other 1 minute and kissing and hugging the next, and okay with it.
So you had the legal part, being comfortable with that, the financial piece of it, the sort of interpersonal part of it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you really had an excellent background for becoming a mediator, because often we think of them as mediators either being attorneys or mental health professionals. You're not in either of those backgrounds.
No.
Okay. So those are real strengths you brought to it. Did you have any weaknesses you thought about when you were thinking, oh, I'm going to become a divorce mediator? Did you think I've got some weaknesses I have to work on?
I did, of course. And I'll tell you, I started my practice around the time that the economy really went into a downturn. And a lot of what was happening were a lot of attorneys were then, you know, mediating and putting out their mediator shingle. And I was nervous because I was thinking, you know, is somebody going to come to me as opposed to going to an attorney? So I realized that although I was comfortable, you know, with dealing with attorneys, you know, I always had to make sure that I was educated on the legal process, on what was going on. So I've, you know, kind of connected myself with several attorneys who gave me guidance, and who still to this day, if I need to call and talk about something and kind of brainstorm, they're there for me. So that was something that I wasn't totally confident in, that I had to work on, and I still always work on it. You know, something else that I really had to work on is that although, yes, I had interpersonal skills, remember that as a negotiator in corporate, I wasn't the one going out to dinner making nice with the clients. I was maybe at the dinner, but I was sizing up who I'd be negotiating with and understanding. So I did have to work on my personal skills in being more open, and I'm going to say almost, you know, have a sense of warmth to me, which I believe that I had really lost in all of those years that I was in corporate. I started my job when I came out of college. So when you go into a big corporation, they're basically grooming you to be how they want you to be. So it's taken a work for me, which now it's naturally, and it's my personality that is naturally like that. But for so many years, I really wasn't using it.
So how did you work on it? How did you make that change?
It was really through self-awareness, really paying attention, forcing myself to be more open. You know, I went through a divorce myself. So, you know, I don't always mention that to clients, but if they ask the question, or if there's a point where I think it can bring value to them or make them feel more comfortable, like, hey, listen, I've been through this. You know, if you get a client who comes in who's so hysterical at the beginning that they can't even start talking, that's where I'll say, you know, and they're embarrassed, and I'll say, don't worry about it. I went through this. I didn't know who I was when I went through my divorce. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Let me also just mention to our viewers that as we go along, we're going to be taking questions, perhaps during the presentation or at the end. And for those of you who are not familiar, if you put your mouse down at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see a box saying Q&A. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter a question, which Roseann will answer. So we'll do that sometime as we go along. When did you first decide to become a mediator, and what steps did you then take?
So I was interested in mediation while I was still working, you know, in corporate. And I didn't really have the time at that point to really look into it. And I was living in New York. And then I decided to make a life change. And this, of course, was after my divorce. And I moved to South Jersey. And I really wanted to take some time and do something fun. So I actually, before I started my mediation training, I started a local business I went into. And at that point, I became very entrenched in the community, and it taught me how to network and things like that. After I had that business going for about a year, I was getting bored. And that was when I decided, okay, it's the time now to really look into mediation. And, you know, I started, like everybody else in this world now, started Googling. And the NJAPM was the organization that I really wanted to look into. And I don't know if you remember, Carl, but I still remember calling you. I reached out to you through email, and then we set up a phone call, and I started talking to you about it. And I was really, you know, wondering if I could do this and make this a full-time job, which at that point, my intention was to keep the business that I had going with a manager in charge, and really for myself to delve into this.
So when did you take the 40-hour course?
I'm trying to remember. It was probably 8 or 9 years ago, because I've had my practice now 9 years that it's been in effect. So I would say about 9 years ago.
Okay. I do remember you very well because you were very, very confident. It seemed like you didn't have a doubt that you could develop a practice. Was I correct?
Yes, you were correct, but you know, as with any new venture, there's always that period of time where you're nervous. And you know, when I left my corporate job, I mean, I just love telling the story, because when I decided that I was going to leave my corporate job and become an entrepreneur, I was so scared. And I thought that once I told my parents what I was doing, they'd tell me I was insane. You have this great executive position and benefits and all of that, and you travel, and I figured they'd tell me I was insane. And then I'd say, okay, I am insane. I'm not going to do this. My parents turned me around on my ear, and they basically said to me, what can we do to help you? So, you know, when I left corporate, the first 3 years, I remember waking up every day really, really nervous, wondering, you know, where's my income? How am I going to support myself? Is this going to work? So yes, while I was confident, I was also cautious. So I think it's good to be a little nervous, because it really keeps you on your toes and makes you kind of really evaluate everything that you're doing and making sure that you're on target.
So describe a little bit about how it developed. You started 8 or 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. You know where you are today. You're supporting yourself. You're making a good living. So how quickly, or how did that grow during this period of time?
You know, the first few years were it was really slow. I mean, it was just really, if I didn't have mediations, the other part of the time I was out in the community. I was networking. I was doing things to educate people about mediation. I was having seminars. I was partnering either with attorneys, financial advisors, like anything that I thought would be able to support me in my business and kind of me start spreading out and having a referral source. So I remember going to some of the seminars and the meetings with other mediators, and there was one mediator in particular, I think she came from like Dallas. And she was in practice about the same time I was. It was probably 2 years. And at that time, she told me that, you know, her practice, she was probably bringing in about, it was over 100,000. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? So I really, when I step back, I think that it's just different markets and kind of, you know, different markets being educated. But it made me just step back and, number one, understand that there was a possibility to do this full time, and that I just maybe needed some more time in my practice. So I would say that I didn't arrive at the point until it was truly full time that I could support myself until well into my 3rd year. But again, all of my time was focused on mediation. Even if I wasn't working in the business, I was working on the business.
So how many hours a week would you be working on your business back then?
Back then, I can't even tell you, because it felt like every waking moment I was sitting either with a computer on my lap, doing research, connecting, and things like that, or I was out in the community connecting with people who were touching the lives of these people who were getting divorced. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many hours. They were a lot, but it didn't feel like a lot to me, because I think you can tell I'm really passionate about what I do and I love it.
Right. So I assume pretty quickly after you took the course, you got your website up and running.
Oh, yes.
Okay. But did that bring in business immediately? Or was it really all this other activity that you had going on?
So I think that at the beginning, it was a lot of some of the other activity, but I will tell you that I really spent a lot of time educating myself on websites, SEO, Google, all of that stuff. And I was really fortunate enough that the person who worked with me on my website was really an expert. And that's all he kept telling me was, Roseann, just keep being involved on the internet, put content out, always generate original content. You'll get up in the SEO. And I have to say that probably it was just at the point in the 3rd or the 4th year when all of that really kicked in. And instead of the majority of the referrals coming from, all of these connections, now I have a lot of clients who just find me through Google search, which I find amazing.
Google search.
Yep. I will always, so I have somebody only answering my phones when I'm not available, because I really, the intent for me always is to keep my business extremely personal and specialized. So I want to have that touch with the person calling, and the number one question that I ask, or the person who answers my phone asks, is, how did you find us? And I have to say, the majority of the time it's Google, and I read all of your reviews.
That's changed over time? It was different in the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning, I wasn't doing the Google reviews. In the beginning, I think that I didn't have enough time with the SEO and things like that. So it was more of so-and-so gave me your name and recommended you, and that type of thing.
How about Mediate.com? Has that been helpful to you?
I'll be honest with you, I don't get a lot from Mediate.com. I find that the individuals who are on Mediate.com most of the time are at the initial stages, right? And we all know, whether you've been divorced or if you're working with clients who are divorcing, the decision to divorce doesn't happen overnight. Usually it's over a number of years, if not many years. So I find that people who are on Mediate.com are just really the people that are surfing to kind of get some information. So no, I don't get a lot of referrals from Mediate.com.
Okay. It sounds like what you did was what Anju Jasani teaches in the marketing part of the 40-hour course. Pretty much basics.
Yeah.
It's the basics of how to create a business. Why were you successful in being able to do this? Create a business, doing the basic things you have to do, and so many other people are not?
I mean, I can't speak to other people because I don't know what they're doing. I do think that, yes, marketing and doing the basics, but it's not a one-time thing. I'm constantly still marketing. I'm always out there. I'm always out there in the community. People know me. I mean, I'm at the point where people will just call me if they need advice on really anything. You have to kind of live it and breathe it, and also market, no matter what it is, all the time. And I think it also needs to be a combination of different marketing things. And that's where I think the average business person doesn't spend a lot of time doing the marketing and always being aware. And I'm going to say, the business word, always being aware of your brand. Everything that I do, really revolves around families and kids. I mean, I have, and I don't even know if you know this, Carl, I have an online community called familyaffairs.com. And I really just started it because there were so many people that I figured were on the internet searching for information when they were at a point in their lives where they were going through some kind of transition. If not divorce, it was they had special needs kids or things that were very private to them. So I kind of came up with this idea, and the guy who helped me develop my website, we just kind of threw up a website, and I have people who contribute and write articles. And, you know, it's not a money generator for me. I'm passionate about doing that, but it's also letting people learn more about me and really where my passion lies. So I do that. I'm president of the board of CASA, which are court-appointed special advocates for Mercer and Burlington counties, because for me, it's always important to make sure that the children are being taken care of, especially abused and neglected children. So I think it's not just one thing. It's a culmination and a combination of everything and kind of the way you live and your philosophies.
Okay, let me take a couple questions now. Yeah. Lynn Norsha has two of them. Do you conduct your mediations with attorneys present?
No, I don't. Early on, I did some mediations with attorneys, and I just really felt that the whole vibe in the mediation wasn't really what I was looking for as a mediator. So I do encourage my clients to seek, you know, counsel, to speak to attorneys, but to use them on the outside of the mediation. So I find that it works better like that.
Right. Will you do it if the clients want to do it?
Yes, but if both of them want to do it like that, yes, I will.
Okay. Another one from Lynn. Could you give some more examples of how you are out there in the community? Where did you educate people about mediation?
Okay. So being out there in the community, for many, many, many years, I went to a lot of these big networking events and really just started, you know, making connections. But as my business was growing and as my time was getting smaller that I had available to go out there and to network, I decided that these big events weren't really great for me anymore because I really needed to connect one-on-one and to really understand someone, have them understand me, understand my personality. So I started using LinkedIn, and I started going on there and saying, okay, I have my list of, you know, people that I want to connect with because, you know what, I want to be a source for my clients that if they need somebody, I can refer them. So typically, who do people need when they're going through divorces? So I'm connected in the community of therapists and psychologists, of real estate people, financial advisors. I started thinking about who knows that a couple is getting divorced before really anybody else. And really that's what I do, and that's what I currently do now. I do the connections most of the time through LinkedIn, or now my connections are introducing me to other connections.
Okay. Another person has submitted a long list of questions about things I think that are not directly concerning today's topic, so I'm just going to pass over those questions. So how have you worked with attorneys? I mean, often attorneys are critical in some respect of non-attorneys. It might be their writing, it might be, you know, the not knowing as much about the law. How have you been dealing, first of all, have you found that from any of the attorneys, and how have you dealt with that?
I'll be honest with you, I really haven't found that from attorneys. I have found the attorneys that I've worked with to be very open, and there's one thing that most all attorneys say about my agreements, that they're absolutely thorough, but in the same token, I never try to be an attorney. So my MOU are written in layman terms. It's basically, you know, spelled out what they agreed to, what they decided. I leave that up to the attorneys. That's their job. Once they get the MOU, and then they have to turn it into the MSA. So I haven't really come across that. only once did I meet an attorney, and it was really for networking purposes. And I could tell he was kind of poo-pooing me, and he put his feet up on his desk and he leaned back in his chair. And I just basically thought to myself, okay, you know what? When I was in corporate, I had to deal with this and I had to put up with it. I don't have to put up with it now. And I really just stood up and I looked at him and I said, you know what? I really don't think that we're a good match for referrals, but thank you for your time. And I left.
Very good. So you write an MOU that looks not like a contract.
Right.
But I assume it's very organized because that's what you used to do.
Yes, yes. Well, yes. And because I was writing contracts, negotiating contracts, I'm very, very detail oriented. So yes, they're organized in a way that makes sense, that, you know, the clients can read and understand them, and then the attorneys can extract the information that they need. Very few times have I had an attorney come back to me for a question of clarification. But I write my own parenting agreements.
Do you maintain a list of what I would call mediation-friendly attorneys?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I educate my clients about it too.
And when you say you educate, how do you?
Well, I explain what I do, you know, and I know that most mediators don't agree with this, but I do a complimentary 30-minute consultation. And during the consultation, I explain to them the different roles the attorneys can play and the different points in the mediation where they can reach out to attorneys. So I always start off with, number one, you should always go and have a consult and educate yourself, no matter what. And there's nothing wrong with it, because so many clients who are coming to mediation, as soon as you say the word attorney, they're like, oh, but we're here in mediation. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that you should skip that process. Then I explain how they can use attorneys, and then I tell them it's very important to get an attorney who is mediator friendly and mediator minded. And I explain, you know, it's not the attorney looking to turn this into litigation. It's an attorney who is there to educate you and give you advice, but ultimately you have the decision and you get to make the decision about what you want to do. So yeah, I don't have a large list that I pull off of. These are attorneys that I'm referring regularly. If somebody does call me up though, and I get these phone calls too, and clearly they're not for mediation, and I'll tell them, and then they'll say to me, well, can you recommend an attorney? And then I'll ask, well, you know, how aggressive do you want to be? And if they want the attorney who's going to be super aggressive, pass along the information. Right.
Do your attorneys refer back to you?
Absolutely. I get a lot of my referrals from attorneys, either right at the beginning, where they've gone for a consult and they ask for, you know, mediators, or I'll get a lot of clients who are in the middle of, you know, going through the process with attorneys, and the attorneys decide, you know what, they can probably mediate, so let's put this process on hold and send them. So yes, I do.
Okay. So let's say you're going through the divorce process. I always start with parenting first.
Absolutely.
Then I move on to equitable distribution, and then alimony, and then child support. I usually refer the clients out to attorneys if they haven't already seen one when they get to alimony. I don't know, is there a certain point where you will tell them they ought to go get an attorney? Is it at the beginning?
So, like I said, I always recommend it during that they at least have a consultation and they get educated, okay? And also during the consult, I will tell them, and the process that I use is parenting agreement, spousal support, child support, equitable distribution. So I tell them that, you know, right after we do the parenting agreement is when we get into the financials of everything. And it's super important that everybody understands. And I explain my process, that typically most of the time when we're going through child support and spousal support, we're working from actual needs and budgets and things like that. But I let them know that if at any time I feel that somebody is either, number one, not understanding, or number two, have too many questions, that's definitely a point that they should seek some outside help from an attorney. Also, I will recommend attorneys when I view that either one party or the other party has really unrealistic views, kind of like the person you get who says, but my friend was getting $10,000 a month in support, you know, why am I not getting that? Well, maybe because you don't even have that income monthly. I mean, you know,
So you didn't have the legal knowledge about certainly divorce area when you started this. You took the 40-hour course, but you know that's a limited amount of time.
Right.
How did you pick up the rest of it? Because I assume by this time you were very comfortable.
Yeah, so the rest of it really was, you know, I always attend the annual family law symposium. I'm always going to, whenever there's classes, the NJAPM has anything, other organizations and things like that. And also, like I said, I have really, you know, good relationships with attorneys that if I need to have some kind of a brainstorming session or questions or, you know, kind of, you know, what happens like typically, or, you know, what do you think about this? So these attorneys are very generous in their time and they'll help me brainstorm.
Any one party helped you a lot in your practice?
Any one party? I mean, not in particular. I do have to say that I have been supported by, there are a couple of attorneys that have real, I'm going to say almost, you know, mentored me to a certain extent on some of the legal stuff. Yeah.
Do you think that, well, what has NJAPM done, you think that was helpful to you? And sort of the second question to that is, what more could the association do to be helping young mediators who are just starting out?
Well, I think the number one thing that NJAPM did a really good job of the training. And I really, I think that I received, you know, thorough training. I was able to reach out to the people who taught in my class after. I mean, Carl, I still reach out to you, you know, sometimes if I want to kind of brainstorm something. So I think the NJAPM does a really good job of that. Where I think that probably the NJAPM could really, you know, kind of support mediators more in having, you know, maybe some like seminars on specific topics. I know you're doing that right now, but really just hone in on some things like, you know, for instance, when the tax laws changed, right now for spousal support and things like that, to have, you know, maybe day seminars where experts are coming in and speaking to these issues.
Right. One of the things that the association has done recently, although it has not gotten a lot of good response from other members in the association, is creating a mentoring program so that a new member would be assigned a mentor. Would that have been helpful to you?
So, you know, I have mixed feelings about mentors, okay, because I think that a big part of mediation, besides, you know, the skills and knowing all of the different areas that you have to cover, but a really big part of being a really good mediator is really honing into what you bring to the table for your clients and your style, okay? And I feel that, especially when it comes to mediating, to have a mentor, you would never want the new mediator to be picking up a style of a mediator that really may not fit them and their personality. So, you know, I think you guys can tell I'm very direct, and this is how I mediate. And I tell my clients up front, you know, I'm here to help you move forward. I'm not going to be here to waste your time, waste my time, like that kind of thing. So not everybody's going to have that style. So that's the part about mentoring. I think that working with somebody on the outside, definitely sitting in a couple of sessions. I mean, I'm mentoring somebody right now because actually I'm going to have, I do a fair amount of mediations in New York just because that's where I came from. So I'm actually mentoring somebody who is going to be mediating with me in New York. And that is the one thing that I keep telling him. This is my style. It doesn't mean it has to be your style. We all as mediators have to do what comes natural and what feels comfortable to us. Because I think that really people that are coming to mediation, they want a sense of authenticity. They don't want to feel like you're sitting there telling them what they have to do.
Right. Now, you have a strong personality, and I mean that in a complimentary way.
Thank you.
How do you temper that, or do you have to temper that in a mediation? Do you have a tendency to want to be more directive as opposed to facilitative? And so how do you work that out?
Yeah, I'm always very aware of my approach and when I can be more direct and when I need to sit back and let the two of them kind of work through things. So that's come also with a lot of years and a lot of mediations. I mean, the more you mediate, the better you get.
Right. Yeah, so that's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's like experience. That's, yeah.
I don't think there is ever a time that I think, well, I know enough now.
No, there's never.
There's always so much more, and it's such an interesting process and so mentally stimulating.
Yeah.
So it's changing all the time. Another question from Lynn. The June 15th Civil and Divorce Conference will have a panel specifically on the impact of tax changes on alimony, in addition to other topics. Registration is now open. So that's a pitch for our annual
there you go.
Seminar.
Great.
Which is always very good. And I know Lynn is one of the people on the committee putting that together. So I recommend that to everybody to go to. So let me again remind everybody that they can ask a question by going to the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And let's see, what do I have here? Do I have anything else? Not yet. Okay. So what else can you tell us about your practice and the establishing of it that would be important to new mediators? I mean, we've talked about a lot. Is there anything we've missed?
Yeah, no, I really think that it's really important for people who do want to do this full time, or even people who are attorneys and kind of incorporate this into their business model. It's a business and you have to treat it like a business. Business people don't come and knock on your door. You have to pay attention to your finances. Just for an instance, I mean, I'm probably now in my 4th office just because I was always very aware of expenses and not paying too much. So as my practice has grown, my offices have become bigger and I need more conference room space and things like that. So I think that is the one piece of advice that I think is really beneficial, is to really treat it like a business, not a part-time, not kind of like a hobby. You have to speak about it and you have to brand yourself.
Question from Anshu Jasani. How different is your geography in terms of your practice, New York versus South Jersey?
So my main office is down here in Haddonfield, but I also have another office in Princeton with the CPA firm that I was telling you about. And geography, I have to say, I get a mix. As my practice has gone on and I'm doing more of the high net worth divorces and, people who are in business, that's kind of the clientele the majority of the clientele that comes into me, mostly professionals, educated, things like that. Once in a while, I'll get the clients who are really the only reason they're doing it is because of the cost issue and things like that. But there's definitely different cultures, and I have the benefit of having been from New York. I kind of can have my New York on when I need to. Down here, people tend to be, for me, a little bit more laid back.
Okay. Question from Michelle Weinberg. What's the average number of meetings you have for divorce mediation? That's the first question. Let's answer that one first, and then I'll go into the second question.
So that's like the number 2 question that clients ask. And as you know, it's hard, but I always say on average, it's between 4 and 6 sessions. Somebody, a couple who have been married a significant amount of time with multiple children. And I keep my sessions to about 2 hours, but I'll be honest, if I see after an hour and a half, they're like totally checked out and exhausted, I'll just end the mediation.
Okay. But your base session is 2 hours?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say that's about the same range I tell my clients.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's usually what it turns out to be. Unless, sometimes you get the clients who are super detailed and want to spend, I had clients this summer, I did 14 drafts of their parenting agreement. It was crazy. But again, it's understanding what the clients need.
Right. Question from Ralph Sukas. Do you ever read, I'm sorry, I didn't go back and ask the second part of Michelle's question. What's the average number of hours, average number of total hours spent inside and outside of the meetings for a divorce mediation?
Okay, so inside mediation, I would say that it's about probably 10 hours.
Okay.
About. Outside typically is probably another 6 or 7.
Do you how long does it take you just to write the MOU? Is that the most of that time?
The MOU, typically an average MOU is usually taking me anywhere between 3 and 4 hours.
Okay. And do you charge just by the hour? Some mediators will do a flat rate for an MOU.
No, I charge by the hour. I don't take a retainer fee. It's pay as you go. I always make it clear that it's time that we're in session, that I'm reviewing or preparing documents. If I need to speak to professionals that they want to connect me with, I'll do a 10-minute conversation at no charge, but anything more than 10 minutes, I charge for that.
Okay. Ralph Sukas asks, do you ever reach a point in the mediation where you feel you can't help the parties? And if you do, how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's not often that it happens. If I think about it, in all the years that I've been mediating, I can really only think of maybe 4 mediations that broke down. But I just recently had clients who were in, and I felt that there was possibly some bullying going on between, the clients, and that decisions that were being made because of fear. So I just told them that I was uncomfortable with moving forward with the mediation, and that I recommended that they go back, and they had started last summer with attorneys. And then they came to mediation. I told them that I think that they really each needed to be represented.
Okay. Question from Ben Feigenbaum. What are your views on online mediation?
So I've done, and I do online mediation. I like to at least do a consult in person with the clients to really get a feel. I don't think that everybody can do online mediation. I certainly don't prefer it. I prefer being in person, but it's definitely doable. I've had clients who have done their entire divorce mediation online because it just worked best for them.
Okay. Question from Lynn. Do you bill clients at the end of each session?
Absolutely. I never have any outstanding receivables. They're paying me for session time, and then I always tell them if there's any time in between, at the next session, they have to pay me. If they cancel that appointment, and I do have in my agreement, they have to give me 48 hours notice for a cancellation, or they get charged, and weekend hours don't count. So, but if they cancel and I've done work, then they owe whatever work was done up to that point of when they canceled the appointment.
Second part, I think we've addressed. How do you address the fee for writing the MOU? I think you said you just bill for the amount of time.
Yeah, it's the hourly fee, yeah.
Do you release the MOU to them before they've paid for your time, or when they make changes? So what do you do there?
No, so what I do is when we have finished, and they think we're finished with the mediation, okay, I prepare the MOU. They come back, they have to come back, and I give them hard copies of the first draft of the MOU. So typically that session, the last session, will be about an hour. That is when I make any changes that they want. Then I will email them the draft, and it's marked draft number 1, number 2, and the date. And then I tell them to review with their attorneys, or if they're not going to have attorneys, to review it on their own and get back to me when they want the final one. But no, I'm getting paid for the MOU before I release it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good practice. Even nice people have a tendency not to pay you for things once they have a product.
Yeah. No.
So, and I hate trying to.
I'm not going to chase anybody.
Right. And I think the next question is, have you ever had a client refuse to pay? And if yes, what did you do?
Never.
Okay. Here's another question I think young mediators think is a problem, and I've never had it a problem. Have you found that it's difficult for the parties to decide who's paying, whether it's half of it or whatever, or do they just normally just pay you?
Okay, so this is where my directness comes in handy. So sometimes typically clients will pay out of the marital funds. They have a checking account, whatever, a credit card. But if there starts to be conversation about who's paying who, I just, basically look at them and I tell them, look, listen, in my agreement, you are each responsible for the full amount. If you want to work it out between you outside of here, how you're going to pay, that's fine. I'll take 2 payments. But in the end, if somebody doesn't pay, the other person's going to be responsible. And that usually ends it right then and there.
Right. And you take credit cards, I assume.
I take credit cards. I do. I have my Square, which I love.
Right. You don't charge them extra if they pay by credit card?
No.
Okay.
No, that's the cost of doing business.
Right, and you can deduct the
things,
right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's if I'll give it one more opportunity for people to ask questions. And seeing none, I really want to thank you.
Thank you.
Delighted, that you have created really a successful mediation practice, especially because you took our 40-hour course and you followed everything that we taught you to do. So that's really great, but I'm sure you would have succeeded in any case because you have the right personality to do that.
I feel very fortunate every day that I get to do what it is that I love to do. So I'm just really passionate about it, and mostly I really feel that it really does benefit so many people. For mediation and in so many different realms. It's not just divorce. I think, mediation is definitely, when people can mediate, they should definitely try to mediate. It's so beneficial. But thank you, Carl. I appreciate it. And, I just want to say to anybody, if you want to reach out to me personally, just go onto my website, shoot me a message. It's advancedmediationsolutions.net. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you when I have time, and anything I can do to help.
Okay, actually I have one more question.
Okay.
Can you detail a little bit more your use of LinkedIn?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, you go in and you can do searches for people that you want to connect to. So I'm just going to, give an example. So if you want to go in and you want to reach out to therapists or therapists who do couples counseling, you kind of do a search by there, and then you look at geographically where these people are. And really, I just, I have a paid service on LinkedIn, so I'm sure there's differences in what capabilities you can have, but I can reach out to anyone and shoot them a little message, even if I'm not connected, and say, hey, I was reviewing your profile. I'm always interested in meeting, couples therapists, because I do refer. I mean, even when people are going through therapy, through mediation, I refer therapists. And are you open to having a conversation? We can either do it in person or even do it through Zoom video over the phone. So that's how you can use LinkedIn.
Well, I seem to have disappeared. I don't know if you
I
can.
still see you.
Oh, you can see me. That's
I
fine.
see you.
Okay, because I can't see myself any longer. But thank you so much for doing this. It was a real pleasure.
You're welcome.
It's being recorded, and it will go to NJAPM's YouTube channel in about a week or so, so people
Okay.
can see it there. And stay tuned for next month's webinar. I will be sending out a notice in a week or so about that. So thank you to everyone who has attended, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Now I have to figure out.